The Sun, Lord of Mysteries, Fanfiction, Chapter 51-60. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 51, Probability. Just as the red lightning was about to strike Lucas, it froze in its path. For a brief moment, it appeared as if time had stopped. Then, the lightning began to fade away, receding to the crimson clouds, from where it descended. The blood in Lucas's eyes stopped flowing, and the wounds on his body began to heal at an astonishing rate. Lucas's face livened up and his fingers twitched. His brows trembled as he slowly opened his eyes. Suddenly, he stood up from the ground, he opened his mouth wide and let out a big gasp for air. His eyes were still filled with a kaleidoscope of emotions, including panic, regret, dread, and fear. "I am alive, I am still alive. How?" He kept gazing about as jumbled thoughts flashed in his head, only flinching backwards instinctively, when he noticed the terrible man who had been haunting him was staring at him with a sneer. A sliver of light flashed across his vision, revealing a teenage lad with silver hair dressed in a white linen shirt and black trousers. Will Osepton, Snake of Mercury. Will ignored Medici and reached into his pocket for a charm with a sun emblem. Then, he placed it on Lucas's forehead, while looking at the other's confused expression. Light. The charm released a dazzling light that enveloped Lucas and instantly teleporting him to the divine kingdom of eternal blazing sun. Before, Will rebooted Lucas, returning him to his previous state before to his encounter with the Medici. It saved him from imminent death. Surprisingly, Medici did not intervene and instead gazed up at the dark sky. He said with a malicious smirk, "Your preparations and arrangements are truly spectacular, Ocuses. But you're still a long way from our Lord." Ads by PubFuture. With his words, the sky above the battlefield lighted up with silver light, as an angel descended from the sky. The angel was clad in silver robes and had 6 silver wings. His red vertical eyes were always apathetic. In his clasped hands, the angel held an inverted cross with a frightening aura of degeneration. Ouroboros, the tail devourer. Under the mutual agreement between the two sides, the gods will not intervene in this conflict between angels. But it doesn't mean they can't use loopholes to their advantage. Ouroboros descended on the battlefield, as his apathetic gaze traveled across Medici and Will. Medici approached Ouroboros and stood near him, while raising his sword and resting it on his shoulders. "By joining this war, you dug your own grave, little snake." Medici gave Will a contemptuous scowl. Will didn't respond to Medici as his solemn gaze was fixed on the inverted cross in Ouroboros' hands. "Medici," Ouroboros muttered flatly as he stared at Medici. "This is my fight, go deal with the Knowledge Emperor." He didn't wait for Medici to respond before approaching Will. "Will Osepton, this is the end of it all," Ouroboros said indifferently. With his words, reality became hazy and blurry, and everything fell into darkness. In this never-ending darkness, Ouroboros and Will floated. Soon, a faint and illusory sound echoed from the darkness, as a colorless river appeared and flowed, with them in the middle of it all. The river of destiny. The 1,000-year chase is over, fate itself favors me, Will, you shall fall. Ads by PubFuture. Yeah, the same old, fate indeed always favors you, Ouroboros, Will interrupted rudely, while nodding his head. "So, shall we proceed? I really need to go and get to the buckets of ice cream that Ocuses promised me after this fight," he added, a nonchalant smile on his face. For a brief moment, Ouroboros' expression froze before returning to normal. "What always gives you such confidence?" he asked indifferently, as his eyes glowed with silver light. Will's eyes also began to glow with silver light and a golden sun symbol appeared on his glabella. "Fate indeed favors you, Ouroboros. But, unlike you, I have never surrendered to fate." "So, that's it," Ouroboros realized, as soon as he saw the sun emblem on Will. Ocuses or Will must have known this was going to happen, and Ocuses must have blessed him in the end. However, neither the sun nor Will's words created any waves in the heart of the Ouroboros. At the end of the day, this is a fight between them, and their own authority will determine who wins. Ouroboros declared as he pointed the inverted cross in his hands at Will. "Let's put an end to it all, Will Osepton." A black ocean descended between them, with an aura of filth and degeneration, as the waves in the ocean swept towards Will like tsunamis. Will exclaimed by opening his arms wide. "Praise the sun." A blinding golden sun rose before him, scorching rays of the light erupted from the sun and collided with the black ocean. Boom. The reality itself broke like shards of mirror at point of collision. Ads by PubFuture. The sun's rays began to melt the black ocean's waves, while the black ocean of filth churned with aura of degeneration, causing the blinding sun to dim. As the light and darkness continued to collide, there was soon an unsettling balance between them, with no side gaining an advantage. Will and Ouroboros, on the other hand, also erupted with a terrifying aura that collided with one another, causing the entire river of destiny around them to become restless. The authority that the snake of Mercury possesses enables them to manipulate probability. The entire war between them has now evolved into a contest over who has more control over the probabilities of victory. It's a battle of wills and fates. This is the stakes for both of them. The one who has the most control over probabilities of victory will triumph in the end, and the gods' authority, which are currently balanced, will collapse and annihilate the loser. While the war of fates was taking place in another space, Medici was walking calmly towards the ruins of the mountains that formed as a result of that girl being slammed into it by his slap. He knew she was still alive and was probably planning her big move. He wasn't going to interfere with her right now because he wanted to see what she had and if it could reignite the long-lost excitement of battle within him. He couldn't find any suitable opponents in this era, so he's hoping the Angel of Ocuses doesn't let him down. He also has a strange feeling that the battle of the snake will be more difficult than he had anticipated. He was unconcerned about Ouroboros' safety, however, because he believes in his lord's might and that even if something goes wrong, Ouroboros will be fine in the end. N-O-V-E in .c Ohm. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed, as his smile broadened in excitement. Rumble. As though an earthquake had struck the northern continent, the entire no man's land rumbled. From the ruins of mountains, an aura of hope and glory emerged. Boom. A pillar of golden light erupted, directly piercing into the sky. The brilliance of the pillar shone all over the world. Medici noticed something extraordinary in the radiance of the pillar. He saw the nostalgic, sorrowful, and hallowed dreams of those who were placed on the bloody hell known as a battlefield, of all warriors past, present, and future who were fully exposed to the fear of death and despair and who still clung to a desire to be exalted. Finally, he heard a roar that seemed to reverberate throughout the world. Chapter 52. Worthy. A golden sword emerged from the pillar of light, trailed by a woman in black armor who floated just behind the holy sword. The holy radiance of the golden sword gleamed brightly like a golden star, illuminating the entire world. The golden sword cannot be described as beautiful because the term, beautiful, will only tarnish it. Instead, it is sacred, created from people's imaginations, a legend woven entirely from hope. It is the manifestation of the prayer named glory. It's the holy sword wielded by King Arthur, Altria Pendragon. It was made by the planet as the crystallization of mankind's wishes, which had been stored and tempered within it. Excalibur, the sword of promised victory. With the authority of knowledge, and the blessings of eternal blazing sun, Diana Knight visualized this god-forged sword. But, as the saying goes, nothing is free. Diana floated in front of the hold sword, a kaleidoscope of emotions flashing across her eyes before settling into determination. She knew what was going to happen next, and it could very well be the end of her, but she didn't back down or hesitate. She raised her hand and grasped the handle of the holy sword in full view of the entire world. Hope, dream, glory, wishes. Diana felt an enormous weight on her shoulders. It was the heaviest thing she had ever felt. It was as if the entire world was pressing down on her shoulders. She heard the whispers of countless people across various epochs, their wishes and hopes poured into her head like an avalanche, completely submerging her. Ah! She screamed in agony as her hands, which held the holy sword, erupted in golden flames that began to melt her fingers. Her face twisted in anguish, and blood began to pour from her eyes and nose, while her body trembled. Ads by PubFuture. She managed to regain some of her consciousness, which was still cloudy due to the whispers, through sheer willpower. She immediately used authority of knowledge to process the wishes and hopes that were filling her mind. Then, Diana saw countless visions in her mind, ranging from the dark era to the age of the gods. She witnessed it all, the hopes and dreams of those fallen. Then, she saw the magnificence of human civilization across the eons. Everything was laid out in front of her like a spectacular play. She witnessed the hope and glory in it. And now she carries everything on her shoulders. It wouldn't be wrong to say she's carrying the entire world on her shoulders. This is the cost of envisioning the holy sword. She will lose herself, if she cannot bear it, but if she can, she will be worthy to hold the Excalibur. But, Diana started losing herself gradually as the weight of the world pressed against her shoulders and mind. The only thing keeping her going was her willpower to never give up. Soon, she couldn't take it any longer, as terrifying whispers tortured her. Even her authority couldn't handle the hope any longer. But, she still didn't let go of the sword, keeping a firm grip on it. She promised her lord that everything would be fine, and she will to keep her word, despite his previous warnings about this sword. No, I can't, she desperately thought, as consciousness were fading away. Diana's body was set ablaze by golden flames that spread from her hands, touching the sword in the reality. Ads by PubFuture. Meanwhile, Diana saw nothing but endless darkness through her hazy vision, and the whispers vanished, leaving everything silent. However, this made no difference to her situation at the end. Then, she saw a river in the darkness, and despite the lack of light around her, she could clearly see the river flowing without beginning or end in sight. In her vision, she noticed the river growing larger. She realized that she was falling towards it. Her last silver of will was also fading away in the endless darkness. Suddenly, a cacophony of noises broke through the silence and echoed in her ears. It wasn't those whispers, she heard everyone's prayers for her, and their concern and worry reached her heart, jolting her awake. She saw Lucas praying to her, making jokes about the promise they made to each other, and then she saw Blaze admonishing her for being reckless, despite his concern in his voice. Finally, she realized it. They were her anchors. As she felt her anchors, her consciousness became clearer. A blinding light erupted in the endless darkness in front of her, morphing into the figure of Akasis. He sighed as he looked at the tragic figure of Diana. Diana, you're still as stubborn as ever. But ironically, it is what got you here, so don't give up, hope, just yet. I'm watching over you and can't wait for you to show off your prowess. Finally, don't forget to destroy Medici. Diana felt a terrifying anchor establish itself to her upon hearing his words. Her lips curved into a smile, and tears streamed down her cheek. As the weight on her shoulders lightened, she finally declared with clear eyes filled with emotion. I will. Then her figure was bathed in golden light, full of hope and glory, illuminating the entire darkness. What she didn't realize was that her knowledge emperor potion was digesting at a breakneck pace right now. Ads by PubFuture. Northern Continent, No Man's Land. Excalibur. Medici was taken aback when he saw the sword, which resembled a sword from a legend he had heard from the creator. At the same time, it felt different, though Medici couldn't pinpoint what the difference was. But he had an instinct that this sword was not the one described in the legend. This feeling perplexed him. Medici put his thoughts aside and focused on Diana, whose entire figure was engulfed in golden flames as her screams faded. She wasn't worthy. He laughed aloud as he looked up at the sky. It's not surprising, given that she's your angel, Acuses. Medici's eyes narrowed suddenly, and he raised his red sword to his side without hesitation. Clang! A golden sword blazed towards him and clanged with such force that the everything collapsed, forming the massive crater with them in the center and disintegrating the nearby mountain range to fine dust. Boom! Boom! It didn't stop there, as cracks appeared across the no man's land that stretched into Northern Continent, with masses of lands lifting up from the ground on one side, filling the entire battlefield in dust and smoke. All of this was caused by a single sword clash. Medici's face was solemn in the crater, but when he saw the sword vanish and a figure emerge from the dust and smoke, his shining eyes and twisted smile told a different story. Diana walked out with a terrifying aura erupting from her. She was dressed in silver armor, with a blue cloak fluttering behind her and a purple crown on her head. Her iris were no longer blue, but rather golden with a scorching radiance. Finally, she took the legendary sword in her hand and casually swung it to her side, causing a slash of light to erupt. Then, it expanded in its path and went to the mountains that had not been destroyed by their clash. Boom! November LBJNN. The slash of light split the mountains in half, with the separated half floating above and disintegrating in light. Diana said as she pointed the Excalibur at Medici. It's now my turn, Medici. Chapter 53, Excalibur. Medici and Diana exchanged glances as their auras collided in a battle for dominance. Everything around them fell silent, like the calm before the storm. Then it all came crashing down in a spectacular way, as Medici and Diana vanished from their position, leaving massive craters in their wake due to the sheer force they were exerting with each of their moves. The figures of Medici and Diana transformed into streaks of golden and red lights that blazed through the sky, colliding and repelling against each other along the way. The angels evacuating from no man's land came to a halt and stared blankly up at the sky. The entire sky was filled with streaks of golden and red lights, as if someone had drawn the most complex zigzag formation on the sky. This only appeared a fraction of a second after Diana and Medici took off into the sky, indicating they collided many times within this second, which was even far beyond what even angels could clearly do or sense. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Run! An angel's horrified yell jolted them out of their trance, and their eyes soon filled with fear. All of them did not hesitate to turn back and begin using their techniques or entering the spirit world to flee the battlefield as soon as possible. Boom! The destructive force erupted from the clashes of Diana and Medici, then impacted on no man's land without any resistance. Destruction. When this terrifying force descended, everything was broken down into fine particles, whether it was mountains or rivers, angels or demigods, nothing could remain intact or survive the destruction. As everything disintegrated, the angels fled using various methods. But, no matter what, they couldn't escape the approaching destruction, which was faster than them. However, the gods did not sit back and watch their angels disintegrate, as the light of the sun fell on all of their figures, teleporting them out of the battlefield. In the sky, Diana was solemn and grave, her eyes trailing each of the slashes in Medici's countless sword attacks on her. With swift moves of her sword, she blocked and parried all of them. She did, however, feel the attack power increase with each attack thrown at her. Boom, boom, ads by PubFuture. She finally made a decision and ignored the incoming sword attacks, and raised her Excalibur, which began to glow with golden light. She looked at the elated Medici, who didn't seem to care about anything but battle. It irritated her so much that she wanted to punch him in the face to get that smirk off his face. She ignored the sword slashes falling on her, which left long gashes on her silver armor. Suddenly, Diana's figure became translucent, and all of the sword's attacks passed through her figure, further destroying the lands behind them. She vanished from her position and reappeared directly in front of Medici, causing the latter's eyes to narrow and to raise his sword to the position of chest. Diana thrusted her Excalibur forward with all her might, aiming for his heart. It wasn't a simple thrust, for the air around the entire sky was extracted and everything fell silent. Boom! Then, it clashed with the red sword. The air finally exploded, releasing a blaze of light. The space shook and collapsed as it was illuminated and overwhelmed by the light storm that was sweeping everything. Diana and Medici continued to clash their swords as sparks of light as bright as the sun flared up. Both of their armor began to crack, and blood poured out from the very cracks, revealing deep gashed wounds. Meanwhile, due to the sheer force of Diana's attack, they also shot out of no man's land. They were blazing across the sky like shooting star, heading towards Solomon Empire. Boom! They blasted into the Solomon Empire as the twisted rules woven throughout the empire literally broke into pieces along with the space in their paths. The Black Emperor's rules over the empire is indeed strong, but that doesn't mean it can't be broken. This was also largely facilitated due to the fact that the rules had lost their connection to the authority that supported them. Solomon did not exercise his authority to stabilize the rules. He knew the six gods would not just stand by and watch, but would immediately accuse him of intervening in their battle. He didn't want to fight them right away, so he could only watch everything with red eyes. Ads by PubFuture. However, he will not hesitate to intervene if they become too destructive. The previous clash of swords alone caused a flash of light that completely destroyed no man's land and even affected the six kingdoms. He is certain that if they continued without the intervention of the gods, the northern continent would be destroyed. The blazing star was descending from the sky in the Solomon Empire, towards a long mountain range with a beautiful city in front of it. Hornassus Mountain Range. Boom! The shooting star finally descended with enough power to make nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. The collision obliterated a 20-kilometer wide area in an instant, resulting in an explosion of rocks and magma erupting from the ground. As the entire northern continent rumbled, a massive shockwave shattered faces of most mountains across the range. An gargantuan explosion ensued, which ripped through the beautiful city of night, obliterating Gothic buildings in a matter of seconds and submerging thousands of people who were still oblivious, thus instantly ending their lives without any pain or suffering. After everything had settled down, All that remained was the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains, with a ruined castle perched atop it. The castle and main peak were collapsing minute by minute, insinuating that they were still affected by the explosion, despite an archangel's desperate attempts to protect everything. In the massive crater, two figures stood up from the ruined ground, still clutching their sword tightly. Medici walked steadily, his black armor shattered, especially the chestplate, revealing a hole through, which clearly displayed his beating heart and devastated lungs. His crimson blood had completely saturated his armor, dripping down on the ground and leaving a blood trail as he walked. Even though he blocked the legendary sword's attack, he was still affected in the end. However, all of his injuries began to heal visibly. This would be a fatal blow to most, but it's nothing for Medici. Diana, on the other hand, was not faring much better. In their collision, her silver armor was completely shattered and broke into pieces, leaving her with only blue traditional robes that were also covered in blood, as deep gashes on her skin could be seen across her figure. Her arm that held the Excalibur was broken, but she didn't even flinch as she twisted it back with her other hand. Her face was also covered in blood, which was dripping from her head. She walked towards Medici, holding the Excalibur, their gazes locked. Despite seeing him in this devastated state, she didn't feel joy, because she knew better. "It's been a long time," Medici said as he spat blood from his mouth onto the ground, "since I've been forced into this state. Even though you are an angel of Aukas's, you are fully worthy of wielding the legendary sword and confronting me with all of my might, Diana." He finished with a twisted smile and his eyes shimmering with joy and excitement, as his sword began to emit crimson light. Diana laughed tragically. "Am I worthy?" She considered the weight she carried on her shoulders as she held the holy sword in her hand. Ads by PubFuture. Those scenes flashed before her eyes, and while everything may have seemed to pass in seconds in reality, it was so long for her that she lost track of time there. Under the terrifying whispers, she almost felt like she was in eternity. Diana took a breather to calm down her raging emotions, as she raised her Excalibur above her head with both hands. The entire holy sword was bathed in a golden light that radiated glory and hope. She finally glared at Medici and spoke to him word by word. "You know nothing about me." Medici chuckled and raised his sword, as the crimson light on the sword surged widely like flames. "Diana, I hope you make it through this. So, we can still fight the next time we meet." He smirked and spoke quietly. Then, without hesitation, he swung his sword down with all of his might. Boom! The red sword emitted a beam of crimson light, annihilating everything in its path, including space and reality itself. Rumble! The entire northern continent rumbled visibly as the crimson beam struck the ground, causing earthquakes across the world. Diana looked at the crimson beam that was heading straight for her. She inhaled deeply as her eyes, which had flashed with a kaleidoscope of emotions, finally settled into calmness. As a beam of light erupted from her holy sword, she clutched the Excalibur with both hands. She declared, as her voice rang out around the world. "Excalibur." She swung her sword, unleashing all of its power, as the golden beam of light descended into the world, blazing towards the crimson light. The golden beam cut through everything in its path. The golden and crimson light beams blazed towards each other, annihilating everything in their path. The gods, who were watching this, finally rose solemnly from their seats. Eternal blazing sun, Earth Mother and Black Emperor didn't hesitate to descend on the battlefield immediately. However, it was already too late. Under the gazes of the entire world, the beams of crimson and golden light finally collided. Boom! An unimaginable sea of scorching light surged out, drowning the figures of Diana and Medici. As the light completely submerged them, they both closed their eyes and their grips on their swords finally loosened. Chapter 54, History. Few hours later, Lucas paced back and forth in the divine kingdom of eternal blazing sun before a massive silver door, his face tense. Creak. The door creaked and opened. As Aukas's walked out, Lucas dashed toward him and quickly inquired. "How's she doing, milord? Is she okay? Is she awake?" Aukas's saw worry written all over Lucas's face. Then, he said, with a light nod. "Diana is fine now, Lucas. I was able to heal her and stabilize her condition. She is still sleeping and will be for some time, so be quiet if you want to see her." Diana was actually on the verge of losing control after wielding the legendary sword and fighting against Medici. Lucas's worried expression faded as he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he bowed quickly and literally ran into the room. Aukas's sighed and turned to look into the room, where Diana lay in bed and Lucas already sat beside her, watching over her. He waved his hands as the door closed, leaving the couple alone. Ads by PubFuture. Then, he began walking down a long corridor lined with white pillars and oil paintings on the walls, eventually reaching the weapon shelf. He summons his weapon from here. He raised his right hand, as Excalibur appeared in his hands with flash of light. Acasus gazed at the holy sword with gleaming eyes, analyzing every detail of the sword in his hand. The Excalibur is far from what Diana can envision with her authority, but he personally blessed her with her hermit uniqueness, which played a significant role in the successful envisioning of the holy sword. However, the person who envisioned still have to pay the price. He also intervened at that time personally and also instructing Blaze, Lucas, and everyone else to pray for her and support her through the ordeal. Acasus was still quite surprised when he first gazed at the envisioned sword. He wasn't sure if this could wield the same power as original held by Altria. However, after seeing the results, he is certain that, while not fully comparable to the actual Excalibur, it is not far behind. His thoughts turned to the battle between the Medici and Diana. The Excalibur allowed Diana to compete with Medici in battle, and despite nearly destroying the northern continent, their battle was truly spectacular though. He, Lilith, and Solomon eventually descended onto the battlefield, only to see the sea of scorching light expand outwards, annihilating everything in its path. If the light wasn't stopped, it would go on to completely destroy the northern continent. When Lilith saw this, she used her authority over Earth to tear apart the entire massive crater from the ground, as the Sea of Light was also contained within the crater by her authority. Meanwhile, he and Solomon rushed to protect Diana and Medici, who were both seriously injured, though Medici fared better than Diana. The crater with the Sea of Light was then thrown into the astral world by Lilith. It completely exploded there, illuminating the entire world's sky. It was the end of their battle. Acasus' gaze wandered over weapons on his shelf, which he had collected over thousands of years, finally settling on the newly added one. Ads by PubFuture. It was the sword based on the Sword of Rupture, EA. He recently sent it to Artisan to repair the damage caused by their fight with the Mother Goddess of Depravity. Artisan was more than happy to assist and fixed it for free. Acasus chuckled as he thought of Artisan's obvious ways of gaining favor with them. Suddenly, he turned around, only to see Ammonizes enter the hall through the door, a sleeping boy floating near her as she walked towards him. Why is he asleep? Acasus inquired, his brow furrowed in curiosity, as he pointed to the boy floating near her. Will Ausepton was the mysterious floating boy. When I descended there, he was on the verge of losing the battle. The authority of degeneration began to have an effect on his soul. Ouroboros, on the other hand, was not much better. After noticing the situation, your son imploded, severely injuring him. Ammonizes spoke softly, her gaze wandering over the oil paintings on the wall. I took care of the pollution that was bothering him and put him to sleep so he could recover faster. Though, fate truly favored Ouroboros, she said vaguely. It's not destiny, Ammonizes. You should be more aware of this than I am. Acasus smiled, his eyes growing distant. It is his blessing to his most devoted and favored angel. Ammonizes remained silent. While Acasus waved his hands, light appeared in the hall and gathered on the figure of the will. It aided his recovery and teleported him to one of the castle's rooms, which also had ice cream waiting for him, when he walked up. Is that the fabled sword? Ammonizes inquired ethereally, her gaze finally settling on the Excalibur in his hands. N-O-V-E, in .c ohm. Yes, Acasus nodded, raising the sword and looking at it as he continued. Would you like to wield it? He reached out his sword to her. Ammonizes took the Excalibur in her hands and caressed it with her fingers, as her eyes behind her gauze flashing with a slight melancholy. Ads by PubFuture. The worthy are the one who can unleash the sword's power. Despite the fact that we, the gods, can hold it in our hands. Only Diana has the ability to unleash its true power. As he observed her actions, Acasus explained, while also closing the small distance between them, by walking towards her. Acasus, you're also certainly worthy, aren't you? Ammonizes asked abruptly, looking straight at Acasus. The sword is the crystallization of mankind's hopes and dreams. An archangel cannot bear the burden and cost of visualizing something like this. Oh, Acasus admitted, you picked up on that. Ammonizes, you are truly the mother of concealment. Nothing seems to be able to hide from your gaze. With a chuckle, he said. So, Acasus, you can actually use the Excalibur. While ignoring his remakes about her, Ammonizes pressed. Indeed, Acasus gave a nod. However, I am worse than Diana. She is the one who bore everything directly, I simply assisted her from behind. Diana is truly extraordinary, Ammonizes remarked as she returned the sword to him. Here. Isn't that obvious, Ammonizes? Acasus spoke as he took Excalibur and placed it on his weapon shelf. Considering who their leader is, he said it with a narcissistic smirk on his lips. You're still the same in many ways, Acasus. After hearing his narcissistic words, Ammonizes responded ethereally, her lips behind the gauze turning upwards to form a shallow smile. Something suddenly drew their attention, however, as Acasus and Ammonizes turned to face the direction of Solomon Empire. It's time, Acasus turned to face her. The betrayal will occur at sundown. History is truly repeating itself, Ammonizes stated as she gazed at the Solomon Empire. Then, while staring at Acasus, she said, Umbella has already built a natural barrier around the Sea of Ruins. It should suffice, as they'll only be keeping Sasrir at bay. Acasus was indifferent. While we slay Solomon. Then, Acasus' figure was immediately bathed in golden flames, as his suit was completely burned away in the flames, replaced by silver armor. The symbol of sun graced upon his glabella, and his golden iris became vertical, as the flames that bathed his figure gathered to form two fiery golden wings behind him. He held a purple book in one hand while the other was empty. Then, he finally turned to look at Ammonizes, his golden vertical eyes gleaming. Ammonizes wore a layered black gown with countless sparkling specks of radiance like stars. Her ribs and waist each stretched out 2 arms. 2 of the 6 hands held a black scythe, 2 held a crimson moon, and the rest were empty. She finally turned, her deep dark eyes gazed at him. Acasus, let's go. Chapter 55, Betrayal. The setting sun cast an twilight glow on the Solomon Empire. The capital, which is located in the heart of the Solomon Empire, also serves as the empire's core. This city, on the other hand, can only be described as crooked, as it has the potential to push a perfectionist insane at first sight. The city was filled with the black Gothic buildings. Their style was oddly lopsided and crooked. The city's streets and roads were built without any order, resulting in complete unevenness throughout the city. The bustling streets were packed with people who defied the current outside world's common sense in every way. Their dressing style was asymmetrical, and their habits and manners were diametrically opposed to world standards. Despite this, people went about their daily lives as if everything was normal. A priest sat on one of the benches on the sidewalk, his figure illuminated by the setting sun, revealing his golden beard and hair. He was dressed in a pure white cloak with a silver cross across his neck, just like any other priest. His golden and clear eyes, on the other hand, revealed his exceptionality clearly. Despite the stark contrast between the priest and everything around him, people walked by was completely oblivious to priest on the bench. Adam, the angel of imagination. Adam was holding a simple feather quill in his right hand and a book on his lap, while writing with the quill in the last page of the book. He also took occasional glances at the bizarre yet strangely beautiful city while writing the book. He was like a spectator, observing but not interfering in any direct way. He was present at the beginning and returned to witness its end. He showed Solomon and others the second blasphemy slate with the path of the god at the beginning of the epic, finally layering the cornerstone for the empire to rise. He witnessed the rise of the Solomon Empire, the very first human empire, since the destruction of modern civilization. He was ever present in all major events throughout history of the fourth epic. Novel in .c Ohm. Ads by PubFuture. The angel families that rose to prominence during this period, as well as the 3 kings of angels, Cheek, Artisan, and Bethel, who are only one step away from godhood, were all facilitated and made possible by him. As his golden eyes gleamed in brilliance, Adam wrote the final paragraph of the book. The radiance of sun and moon illuminated the empire. The national flag in the top spire of the royal palace fell from its pole onto the dusty ground. The terrified crowd paid no heed as they stamped on the flag that they had once revered above their own lives. The golden sun and crimson moon descended on the empire, bringing the magnificent empire that had stood for a millennia to an end. The end. Adam finished and closed the book as the cover revealed the title, which was boldly written on it. The Solomon Empire. His gaze was finally pulled to a Gothic castle as he saw 2 angels walk out of the balcony, one of them holding a brass book. Adam's golden eyes become deep and mystical for a brief moment after seeing those angels. Then, His gaze was drawn to his finished book, which he took and placed within his robes. He raised his hand, as a new book appeared from nowhere on his hands. Adam gently caressed the black cover, as illusory letters appeared on it in a jumbled fashion, eventually joining to form a title on the book, which said, Tudor Trunso Est United Empire. He opened the book and took the quill, writing on the first page. The beginning. Adam, on the other hand, did not continue, but instead closed the book and placed it in his robes. He then rose from his seat and walked in the direction of the Gothic castle. His figure vanished among the crowds under the illumination of twilight. Dash 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 dash. Ads by PubFuture. Two angels walked out of a room onto the balcony of the Gothic castle, their figures illuminated by the twilight. The angel in front had brass-colored hair and golden eyes. He had attractive features, but exuded a scholarly air. He was holding a brass book in his right hand. The brass book is the uniqueness of Justiciar pathway. The angel following behind had brown hair and a sharp, reserved face. He had blue eyes that were filled with indifference. They were Trunsoest and Alitza Tudor, the subordinates of the Solomon, Black Emperor. Trunsoest came to a halt at the edge of the balcony and looked out over the city. His eyes were hesitant, and his heart was full of self-doubt and questions. His grip on the brass book tightened as his gaze wandered to the royal palace in the heart of the city. His eyes was drawn to the waving flag atop the spire. He instinctively took a step back and dare not look at it again. Alitza noticed this and grabbed his shoulders, causing Trunsoest to turn to face him. Trunsoest, there is no turning back. Every minute counts from now on, as our lives hang in the balance. The Majesty will soon discover what is wrong, and Mr. Dor will be powerless to protect us by then. Alitza said solemnly, but a tinge of jealousy rose in his eyes as he looked at the Trunsoest in front of him. However, seeing his hesitation, which didn't go away even after hearing this, Alitza sighed and took his hands off the other's shoulders. In the end, it's your choice. He said it firmly, as if he was willing to die alongside Trunsoest even after being exposed. Alitza finally said, as his blue eyes gleamed, remember our dreams, Trunsoest. They cannot fade alongside us. What Alitza and Trunsoest didn't realize was that they weren't alone. A priest was nearby, quietly watching everything that was going on. A flash of blue light appeared near the priest, and a black-haired man materialized nearby. Ads by PubFuture. Bethel Abraham, Mr. Dor. Bethel stood silently next to Adam, gazing at the two angels and listening in on their conversation. Finally, he asked Adam, do you think he'll be able to do it? Adam finally turned to face Bethel. His golden eyes, which were always serene and calm, gleamed brightly as he looked at Bethel for a brief moment, which went unnoticed by Bethel. Then, he replied softly, as his gaze fixed on the golden sun on the horizon. It's always the unexpected ones that surprises everyone in the end. Bethel's brows furrowed in surprise, and he remained silent. They were just standing in the twilight of the sun, watching history repeat itself. Trunsoest took a breather at the edge of the balcony to calm his raging emotions. He looked at Alitza, and his words echoed in his ears. Remember our dreams, Trunsoest. They cannot fade alongside us. Soon, the last words of eternal blazing sun during the meeting flashed through his mind. Trunsoest, with your own hand, you will usher in the new era. The era of order and justice will arrive, just as you envisioned. My dream, Trunsoest thought as his entire life flashed before his eyes, those lies and deception stinging his heart. He walked forward, his eyes shining, the last of his hesitation and self-doubt gone, as did the pain in his heart. He opened the brass book, which began to flicker with light, and a divine aura erupted from him. The divine aura morphed into massive symbols of the 6 gods that hung in the sky. Soon, the symbols entered Trunsoest's body one after the other, under the blessings of 6 gods. His figure expanded into a gigantic black shadow that covered the entire sky, holding the brass book in one hand and ILL Suri balance scale in the other. Trunsoest gazed at the Solomon Empire, illuminated by the twilight, as the brass book shone brightly. He declared, as his majestic voice reverberated throughout the world, all rules are ineffective. Chapter 56, Chaos and Order. All rules are ineffective. As a flash of brass light swept the Solomon Empire, Trunsoest's majestic voice reverberated around the world. Trunsoest. A furious voice thundered from the royal palace, and an aura of chaos erupted, sweeping the empire like a black tide. The authority of chaos and order collided in a magnificent war for dominance, as the reality around the entire empire began to glitch. Despite the Black Emperor's desperate efforts, the Solomon Empire began to crumble, as if it were nothing more than a fragile sand castle hit by a powerful wave. "No, Your Majesty!" Exclamations rang out across the empire as realization struck everyone. The rules, woven into the reality of the empire by Black Emperor gradually faded under order of Trunsoest. Trunsoest's order is also far from simple. It contains his subconscious desire for the ideal empire he dreams about. The authority of order exerted on reality was based on his dreams, so it wouldn't be wrong to say that his dream began to influence reality. Trunsoest was able to do this due to the Justiciar uniqueness, and the authorities of the six gods assisted him throughout the ordeal. He was able to accomplish this largely due to the order of Akas's supporting him, the life of Lilith relieving him of the burden, and, finally, Ammonize's concealment. The order finally clashed with Black Emperor's chaos, who fought to prevent it from influencing and changing his empire. However, even with the support of six gods, Trunsoest's order will only be short-lived. The reality around the empire flickered and glitched at phenomenal rate. With each glitch, the reality altered. One moment, it was a paradise with order and balance. Another moment, it revealed a distorted empire riddled with chaos and corruption. Ads by PubFuture. The ever-changing realities in the glitches eventually converged on these two. The changes in reality were profound, as everything within the empire was changing as well. The common people in the capital walked around wearing asymmetrical styled dress, but due to sudden glitch in reality, their dress transformed into noble suits and gowns identical to the fashion in the outside world. Their habits and manners, which were diametrically opposed to world standards, also changed to perfectly match it. The crooked and lopsided buildings, as well as the streets and lanes, became normal and orderly. This type of change occurred not only in the capital but throughout the empire, but this paradise of order did not last long, as the twisted Solomon Empire retuned, with yet another glitch. The majority of people in the empire were completely oblivious to changes. However, they can be considered fortunate when compared to angels and archangels, who were conscious throughout the entire alterations of reality. This seemed to go on indefinitely, as the authority of order and chaos clashed for dominance. Soon, balance was finally broken. Despite the fact that everything seemed to take an eternity, it had only been a few seconds in reality. Finally, the changes eventually settled on the same twisted and distorted empire. As order began to crumble, chaos won. With its fall, however, it also completely destroyed the rules woven into the reality of the Solomon Empire. Suddenly, the sky around the entire world changed as the sun in the horizon rose to the middle of the sky and a crimson moon rose from the other end of the sky. The sun and moon appeared in the sky at the same time, as one part of the sky became day and another part of the sky became night. At this point, rules of Solomon were completely lifted, allowing the gods to directly extend their power into the empire and removing Solomon's established advantage. The radiance of the celestial bodies illuminated the Solomon Empire, eventually converged on the royal palace in the heart of capital. At a perceptible rate, royal palace became imaginary. However, chaos sprang from within the castle once more, attempting to twist the trajectory of the light of sun and moon. However, it failed, as the light of the sun and moon shined brightly throughout the castle, illuminating the entire structure. The royal castle then vanished from the material world. Trunsoest's figure returned to normal in the balcony, and he began falling to the ground unconscious. As the light faded, the brass book dropped from his grip as well. Ads by PubFuture. Alitza grabbed him in the book, his hands still quivering and his eyes filled with horror and despair as he remembered what he had just gone through. The entire experience completely scarred his heart forever. He was jolted out of his stupor as a hand was placed in his shoulders. Then he turned around to see Mr. Dorr standing there. "Leave the capital as soon as possible." As he glanced at the sun and moon in the sky, Bethel murmured solemnly, "The war of gods is about to begin. However, where could we possibly go?" Alitza was nevertheless cautious, given their traitorous status. "Pray to Earth Mother." As his figure dissipated, Bethel said, "She'll look after you and help Turnoist in his recovery." With his disappearance, the entire capital began to tremble as if an earthquake had struck, and plants and trees began to grow at an astonishing rate. Alitza, seeing this, did not hesitate to mentally recite the honorific name of Earth Mother. In the next moment, he and Turnoist vanished from the capital. People were racing about around the capital, terror and panic obvious on their faces, in the midst of the mayhem. They were indifferent, as they stamped on the national flag, which they once regarded as more important than their own lives. Adam was sitting on the same bench. He glanced at the flag on the dusty ground before taking his new book and starting to write on the first page. Tudor Turnoist United Empire. Beginning. Chapter 1. Betrayal. In the vast astral world, which was even more abstract than the spirit world, seemed to encompass all of the universe's authorities and symbolism. Ads by PubFuture. In this infinite space filled with illusory stars, a Gothic-styled palace appeared. Two enormous figures floated towards the castle from the corners of the astral world. A woman wearing a long, layered black dress that was not complicated but had countless stars speckled on it. A pair of huge arms covered in dark black short hair grew out of both her torso and waist, but there was a beautiful and gentle face covered in thin black gauze. One of her two hands held a massive scythe, and the other held the crimson moon. The remaining pair held nothing, as though she was holding an invisible object. Ammonizes, Evernight Goddess, a man wearing silver armor with golden streaks that gleamed with light. He had an angular face, short white hair, and his golden vertical iris that glinted brightly. A pair of massive wings emerged from his back shoulder, composed of fiery golden features that coated with flames. He held a purple book in one hand and an exaggerated sword bathed in red light in the other. Aucases, Eternal Blazing Sun. November LBJNN. With their approach, the royal palace began to collapse. The massive walls, spires, and tower fell one by one, revealing a figure sitting on a black throne to the astral world. The figure was a middle-aged man in royal robes and a black crown. He had long black hair that reached his hips and deep black eyes. He had angular features and exuded aura of authority and sternness. Solomon, the Black Emperor. Solomon sat on his throne, his expression calm and majestic, overlooking the two gods coming for his life from above. When his gaze landed on the white-haired god, his deep black eyes flashed with rage, and his fingers were tightly pressed in his armrest, nearly cracking it. Aucases. Solomon spoke in low voice, but anyone could sense the seething rage hidden within. It's you again. His eyes flashed with memories of humiliations he had suffered as a result of Aucases to everything that had happened up to this point. His tone finally changed as his face twisted in rage and his black eyes shone brightly. His voice rang out across the astral world as he slammed his arms against his throne, shattering it. You took everything from me. Was the war between order and chaos good? That part took me a long time to write, because both of those authorities are too abstract. But I did try my best. Chapter 57. Ravings in Horror. Whoosh. Solomon was greeted with a colossal sword soaked in red light, which was thrusted with such force by Aucases that it entirely shredded the very fabric of reality. A phantom of crimson moon rose just above the sword. The crimson moonlight with the authority of yin flowed onto the sword. The moonlight swirled around the blade before combining with the red light on the sword, further saturating the light and turning it blood red. What the hell is this sword? Solomon thought in shock, while all of his senses and instincts screamed in danger, the kind that could take his life in an instant. He was most surprised by the sword. Within the sword, he felt the authority of twilight and sun. He couldn't fathom how that was possible in the first palace. The authority of yin was now combined with the sword, making it even more powerful. Just then, a legend about Aucases that he had heard when he was an archangel flashed through his mind. He had dismissed it at the time because he thought the legend was outrageous and false, but this was totally due to his prejudice against Aucases. According to legend, the white angel betrayed the creator by stabbing his sword into the creator's heart under the twilight of the sun. The sword was completely stained with the blood of the creator. It also said to have cast twilight over the entire world before to the cataclysm, foreshadowing the end. This legend led many people to claim that the sword of Aucases was the most powerful weapon on the planet. If this is indeed that sword, he is certain that he has no chance under it. Solomon felt remorse as he reflected on his past. But he didn't dwell on it and instead focused on the situation at hand. He didn't use his authority to twist anything related to the sword, because he knew it would utterly fail. The sword was ripping the fabric of reality. Without the foundation of reality, his authority would be completely vulnerable. He cannot bring disorder to void because there is only nothingness in void. This was one of his weaknesses, which he had recognized a long time ago, and he had already devised a method to make up for his weakness. Solomon rose from his shattered throne and gazed at the blood sword. He raised his hand and made a twisting gesture, while also asserting his authority of disorder. But, just then, a sound of laughter pierced his ears, echoing around him. No vel b in c om. Solomon's hand froze, and his gaze was drawn to Achasis, who was staring at him, while thrusting the blood sword towards him. Achasis laughed, and the purple book in his hands shimmered. The eye in the center of the book cover began to glow with light. Ads by PubFuture. He opened his mouth and spoke words that most common people wouldn't understand. These words entwined to form terrifying and crazy ravings. You are truly amusing, Solomon. You recall the angel in whom you had the most faith. Trunsoest is truly one of a kind. As he seeks order and justice above all. It's odd that you trusted him despite knowing all of this. But, considering your character, you must have dismissed him as a coward and weakling, but ironically, he was the first to nail your coffin shut. Your empire, of which you were so proud, is collapsing. Your ostensibly loyal subjects are showing their true colors. How do you feel, Solomon? Betrayed by those closest to you and abandoned by those who swore allegiance to you. To be left all alone in this dark cosmos, only capable of witnessing your life crumble before your eyes and being powerless to prevent it. How does it feel, Solomon? And it's quite funny, Solomon, that you still think everything I did was just to destroy you. Let me tell you the truth. Everything I did was designed to bring down Sasrir. It's amazing to think that he has continued to dominate the planet and shape it to his liking even after his death. You, on the other hand, are nothing more than a poor worm in my way. Achasis was deliberately using information to fill up the ravings through the authority of knowledge. He used this to subject Solomon to the effects of a two-pronged attack, the mental corruption caused by his ravings, and the corresponding information to distract and torment him. He did this to disrupt Solomon's actions and push him to the brink of losing control, allowing him to thrust his sword into Solomon and kill him in a single blow. His ravings are far from ordinary. With the authority of the hermit and the status of God, his ravings can affect even true gods. This is even more so for Solomon, whose anchors are collapsing along with his empire. At that instant, the ravings of Achasis echoed in Solomon's mind like sharp blades piercing through his psyche, tearing down his mind. The information poured into his mind, presenting everything that was going on in the world. Ads by PubFuture. The fall of his empire, the betrayal of the angels' families, indifference of everyone. The pictures replayed in his mind again and again, striving to dismantle him into the last of his bits. Solomon's form collapsed onto his throne, becoming pitch black like shadow, with countless eyes sprawled all over him. He was filled with regret, pain and agony when he saw those images, and the emotions began to cloud his mind and heart. However, he was able to suppress these ravings and emotions for a split second due to his sheer willpower and authority. He then asserted his authority without hesitation. He distorted the concept of sound, while also distorting the concepts of space and distance surrounding his figure, to increase the distance between him and the sword. Despite the fact that he knew this distortion would be immediately broken with the reality shattering of the sword. This will at least buy him some time, which he desperately needs. The ravings was silenced and the blood sword that was close to his vision become distant. Immediately seizing this opportunity, Solomon desperately used his remaining anchors and authority to stabilize his mind while removing the information and pollution in his mind. His mind and body improved visibly, the eyes on his shadowy figure began to fade one by one. He finally avoided the fate of complete loss of control. But, just then, a flash of golden light swept through the surroundings, with the aura of order. The order of Achasis rendered his distortions in the concepts of sound, space, and distance completely void. As he felt the order, Solomon's eyes flashed with deep hatred. The previously silenced ravings resurfaced in his ears, and a distant red sword appeared not far from him. However, he refused to succumb to the same attack and rose from his throne. Suddenly, he was startled to see a burly figure. A divine woman in a long black gown appeared. Her face was draped in black gauze. She had a smile, which was visible through her gauze. Ammonizes. How? Concealment. Solomon realized. However, his realization came too late. When his gaze fell on Ammonizes' smile, his face contorted in horror and fear. He appeared to have witnessed something beyond his comprehension or peered into the unknown itself. Ads by PubFuture. Ammonize's honorific name also includes the Empress of Horror. Akas's ravings also increased at the same time. Solomon's figure collapsed as an invisible storm of fear and ravings tore through his mind and wreaked havoc. His sanity was slowly eroding, pushing him over the edge. Akas's increased the force of his sword thrust after noticing this. He intended to kill Solomon with a single blow of his sword. Solomon finally gave up, stabilizing his collapsing condition, as he saw the red sword right in front of his heart. His last sanity desperately sought use authority of disorder one last time. He did not distort fear, sound, time, or reality, as one might expect. But it was something he had only recently discovered within himself. Misfortune. He was cursed with misfortune by Ammonize's during the battle, which he didn't realize until later due to her concealment and his poor mental state. Then, he distorted the concept of misfortune itself. Solomon immediately felt the ravings and fear leave his mind, and his collapsing figure came to a halt. He regained complete lucidity. He began to have illusions that the entire world revolved around him, and that he was the center of it all. He didn't get lost in this feeling, though he knew it was due to the blessing of luck, which he had received through distorting misfortune. It also enabled him to temporarily get rid of his desperate situation. Solomon saw the red sword approaching his chest and about to pierce his heart. He didn't hesitate to use all of his power at this time. Chaos, he roared, and a divine aura erupted from him. Crack, the reality around his figure cracked and collapsed like shards of mirror. Solomon used his authority of disorder to destroy very order of reality, causing everything to fall into chaos. Before the sword could pierce him, the endless surging chaos consumed his figure and throne, completely covering everything like a cocoon. Akas's eyes narrowed when he saw this. But his sword still advanced, blazing towards the torrent of chaos. Clang! When it finally collided, a flash of orange and golden light erupted, lighting up most of the astral world within the barrier and even making the barrier visible. A massive, indescribable face with bloody tentacles appeared to cling to the transparent barrier at that moment. This indescribable being's gaze was entirely fixed on the Akases. Chapter 58. Historical Projection. Akases floated in the infinite space above the beautiful planet. His gaze traveled across the northern continent, witnessing chaos and war. Under his command, the angels of the six churches began to invade the Solomon Empire and eliminate any resistance. The light and thunder blazed across the empire, wreaking havoc. He saw the cities being engulfed in flame and lightning storms. The screams of pain echoed in his ears before being silenced forever. Chaos, destruction, war, fear, he saw it all in the continent beneath him. He was well aware that he was the source of all of this. His eyes reflected the burning people and destroyed lands. Even so, he was indifferent. Seeing the devastation caused by his actions, his heart didn't even flutter with any emotions. This was not because his divinity made him apathetic. He didn't try to deceive himself into believing that these were necessary sacrifices for a new and prosperous era to arrive. In fact, he couldn't care less. Other than his own people, he was completely unconcerned about others. He didn't care what happened to them as long as those he cared about were safe and his goal was met. He recognized his own selfishness. But that's just who he is. He wasn't going to change that for anyone or anything. Did you find Solomon? Ammonize asked. She was floating alongside him in the infinite space, turning to look at him. You know, there are times when I truly despise fate, Akases stated as he raised the purple book in his hands. I didn't expect him to distort my misfortune at the last minute. Ammonize said, looking away. It isn't your fault. Your concealment couldn't last much longer, Akases said as the purple book in his hand began to shimmer with light. In addition, Solomon gave up on attempting to stabilize his body and mind. He's still as daring and reckless as ever. Fate, on the other hand, does not favor him, Ammonize added ethereally, even though your attack was unsuccessful and he managed to escape thanks to his luck. With a chuckle, she emphasized luck. Ultimately, he was still affected by twilight. Come on, Akases spoke up suddenly, his eyes glowing purple. I tracked him down. He is in his divine kingdom which in the sky of no man's land. Despite his situation, he seemed to have made every effort to cover his entire kingdom in many distorted rules in order to keep us from finding him. But, it's a shame he's facing me. He said it with a smile. Is it because of information? Ammonize inquired ethereally, as she looked at the purple book. Let's go. Akases said nothing in response to her question. He did, in fact, track down Solomon's hiding place using the information he used to corrupt him. He's mostly on the verge of losing control. Let's get rid of him once and for all. So, it's indeed information. Ammonizes concluded in ethereal tone, simply after hearing him. Ads by PubFuture. Akasas sighed, and turned to look at her. There is not a lot of time. He paused and looked down on northern continent, as his face became solemn. Adam, Akasas murmured as his gaze was drawn to Blaze, who was holding a book, and Adam, who was walking towards Blaze. Adam appeared to have noticed his gaze and looked up, staring at him with a gentle smile. Before, averting his gaze and approaching Blaze. Blaze was given the mission of Lucas to take the Grossel travels from Mobit Zoroast. Because of the chaos, Blaze completed the mission quickly. He had already left the Solomon Empire under his arrangements. He is also now certain that the Grossel travels is a sequence -1 characteristic of the visionary pathway. NOVELBJN.C Ohm. However, Adam intercepted Blaze. Quite coincidentally, there were also present in No Man's Land. Akasas was getting a headache as he considered the possibilities. And he can't descend personally because Solomon is still alive, but it does not come to a point where there is no other option. He had already told Blaze what he should do in this situation. He knew that there would be situations like this in the War of Gods, so he devised a perfect counterplan. However, he is unsure whether he will succeed in the end, given that he is up against his formed lord. What are you going to do? Ammonizes asked. She also looked at Adam from the astral world. I already have a plan. Come on, let's go and slay Solomon and be done with it, Akasas said finally, shaking his head. Northern continent, No Man's Land. Blaze was someone that could be described as fearless and indomitable. He had become an angel in the path of the fool despite all the difficulties in his path, which were far greater than any other, through sheer will and a little bit of luck. With his lord, he had confronted the gods themselves, and he had witnessed horrors beyond mortal comprehension. He never feared death at any of those times. On the contrary, he danced in and out of death's embrace every day of his life. Even if his lord asked him to go on a death mission, he would walk to his death without hesitation. So, there aren't many things that can affect the heart of Angel of Miracles. However, Blaze was now confronted with a situation that caused his indifference and calmness to fade. Blaze noticed a priest approaching him slowly. In the face of the most terrifying king of angels in existence, he didn't actually feel any fear like the most. Yes, the Angel of Imagination was far more terrifying to Blaze than even the infamous Angel of Time. He was not actually afraid, but he was completely overwhelmed by the mere presence of the Angel of Imagination, his emotions spiraling out of control. Ads by PubFuture. Just as the Angel of Imagination's golden eyes locked on him, he had the impression that everything around him was completely striped and could be seen through by other. He felt like his life was nothing more than a book that the Angel of Imagination could easily read through. It truly disturbed him and reminded him of the first time he met the Angel of Imagination, one of the memories he avoided recalling. Despite his chaotic heart, Blaze's expression remained unchanged on the surface. He turned to face Angel of Imagination. "Your Excellency," he unexpectedly greeted, his grip on the book tightening. His other hand was already in his pocket, reaching for a purple charm. "Blaze Larson," Adam spoke gently, "it appears that you have been doing well since the last time. It's all because of my lord's grace." Blaze was humble. Akasas. While staring at Blaze, Adam's eyes shone brightly. Blaze's heart clenched in anxiety as he reached for the purple charm. Eventually, he resisted the urge because he was still under Adam's gaze. "It's a pity, Blaze. You are quite special," Adam said abruptly. "You are better suited than Antigonus and Zeratul to progress further on the path of fool. However, fate does not favor you." When Blaze heard that, he was taken back in his heart. Even though he is eager to advance, he is also well aware that the chances of him doing so are slim. Even his lord is powerless to help him. "It doesn't really matter much to me anymore." As he responded, his expressionless face revealed a smile. Adam exchanged a silent look with Blaze before looking up at the sky. Rumble. As the entire land beneath them rumbled, a pure ray of light emerged from the horizon, instantly covering half of the sky. The thick darkness appeared on the opposite side of the sky and collided with the pure light. As darkness and light collided, a twisted divine kingdom appeared in the sky above the vast expanse of light and darkness. Now, when Blaze noticed the Angel of Imagination focusing elsewhere, he seized the opportunity. Knowledge. As the purple charm in his pocket began to glow with light, he uttered in his mind. Ads by PubFuture. Then, an endless torrent of information and knowledge poured down on Adam's mind. Actually, Blaze knew that this attack would have no effect on the Angel of Imagination. But this was done to buy him some time. Then, Blaze quickly stretched out his right hand to grab the air. A figure appeared in front of him as he drew his arm back. The man had neat blonde hair and golden eyes. He was dressed in white robes with a sun emblem. He had attractive features and exuded a gentle aura. This was the historical projection of Lucas, Angel of Light. The historical projection of Lucas that he summoned, on the other hand, was somewhat special. As he looked at Adam, the Angel of Light's dimmed eyes regained their brilliance, and divine aura erupted from him. His figure emitted an endless stream of pure light, as though the sun itself had descended on the world. The Lord had descended into the world on occasion, using Lucas as a vessel. He summoned Lucas's historical projection from one of those specific times. This projection was now equivalent to a portion of his Lord. Adam cast a glance at Blaze. He didn't seem to be affected by Blaze's attack in the least. He just stood there and watched, not intervening. His gaze was drawn to the figure emitting pure light. Adam, Akasis smiled. It's been in a while. An illusory divine kingdom floated in the sky, in an endless state of disorder and chaos. A colossal sword slashed through a section of chaos, as rays of light and darkness shone into the kingdom, causing a portion of the area to return to day and night. Akasis emerged from the light, holding a massive sword that hung down naturally, causing the tip to touch the ground. Your bravery and boldness astounds me, Solomon. He laughed. However, it's not going to change your predetermined fate anytime soon. Then, Akasis walked forward, his sword being dragged across the chaos, causing the illusory ground to split apart, producing glimmers of pure sunlight. Deep within the chaos, Solomon sat on his ruined throne. His figure had changed drastically from before. His long black hair had turned white, and his face and body were wrinkled. His royal robes were ripped, and his black crown was shattered. His eyes were tightly shut, and his expression was twisted as his body trembled. He appeared to be in endless pain and agony. Solomon's closed eyes opened as he heard Akas's voice echo in his ears. He looked tremblingly at the Akasis who had invaded his kingdom. As the darkness thickened, Ammonizes appeared in the night, holding a massive scythe and a crimson moon. She flitted towards Solomon as soon as she descended, following Akasis. Chapter 59. The End of an Era. Akasis advanced, raising his finger and pointing to the illusory ground. A blinding golden light condensed and shot out of the tip. The light was illusory, it passed through the divine kingdom's ground, heading towards the continent below. Then he looked ahead, at the chaos that was enveloping everything in his path like a black ocean. Really, Akasis grumbled as he saw the endless chaos in the path, rushing towards him like a raging tsunami. From the chaos, he can sense bone-chilling hatred and seething anger. He can see that this was just another pathetic attempt by Solomon. With his prying eyes, he had already seen through Solomon's condition. Solomon is on the verge of losing control, due to his information polluting him and Twilight injuring him. The Twilight ensured that Solomon's desperate situation remained unchanged, no matter how Solomon tried to stabilize himself with his authority. He was going insane at the moment, trying and failing every single time. Let's switch things up. Akasis had previously decided to go and slay Solomon with Ammonizes in the depths of the Twisted Kingdom. But he decided to dismiss it. As the northern continent is bustling with action, his presence is also needed in many places. Despite being a god, he now feels somewhat helpless. What about the northern continent, you might ask? Previously, when he swept his gaze across the continent, he noticed Cheek and Bethel together. In the Sea of Ruins, there was also another war of gods going on with Sasrir. More importantly, Adam is right directly beneath him. So, there is really a lot going on down there. Finally, Akasis decided. He turned to look at Ammonizes, who was following close behind him. His eyes began to glow purple as he relayed information about his new plan to her. Ammonizes paused in her path and made a grabbing motion in the air with one of her empty hands. She then turned gaze at Akasis and nodded, before fading into the darkness. Now, Akasis faced the oncoming chaos and raised the purple book in his hand. You have 2 free spins to get 1.05 lakh bonus. You have 2 free spins to get 1.05 lakh bonus. Paramatch. Ads by PubFuture. The purple book in his hand became illusory, before turning into a stream of light. Then, It shot into his body. Akas's purple eyes gleamed, and a divine halo dawned behind his head. An outline of a balanced scale began to condense in his empty hand. November LBJNN. He intended to use his knowledge, authority. But he had no intention of visualizing anything with knowledge. Yes, Hermit's true power was far more than just visualization of knowledge. The authority of knowledge in the Hermit pathway can be summed up in a single sentence. With knowledge as the fulcrum, I shall move the entire world. The knowledge authority enables the manipulation of the laws of the world. This, however, is far from easy to achieve. One must have sufficient knowledge and have thoroughly analyzed all available information about that law before being able to manipulate it. This was also why he had never used this aspect of authority in any of his previous battles. He didn't have the time or patience to sit and analyze a law, which could take many years. It's never easy to analyze a law, especially in the world of mysteries, and it also takes an enormous amount of time. However, Akas's is now using the authority of knowledge to manipulate the law of order. He will have no trouble manipulating the order because he himself holds and represents the authority of order. He was planning on an ultimate move, combining his authority of knowledge and order. If he didn't miscalculate, the next move is on par with the supernova attack he used to deal with Mother Goddess of Depravity. As he began, his heart was filled with anticipation and excitement. He didn't come up with this plan right away, he already had such an idea when he first got his hands on the Hermit uniqueness. Akas's floated up in the light, holding an illusory balance scale in one hand and a sword in the other. He closed his eyes, as a white cloth materialized and covered his eyes. His perception of the world changed in that instant. Ads by PubFuture. He saw the order that made reality itself. It was like shimmering brass lines on the fabric of reality, coursing through it like veins. They support reality and hold everything together. Even though he had sensed its presence before, this was his first time seeing it so clearly. He intuitively knew that all he needed was a thought to command and control it. At the moment, he was very close to becoming a representation of order on Earth. He didn't know whether, in this state, he would be above or equal to Justiciar. But it doesn't really matter much to him. How powerful is he now? Akas's smiled as he looked around at the raging chaos. The illusory scale in his hand sparkled with light. A vast divine aura erupted from him, breaking through the restraints of the divine kingdom to cover the entire world. Deep within the chaos, Solomon, who was using the last of his power to attack Akas's and Ammonizes, felt all of his instincts scream in danger. However, before he could do anything, a crimson moon rose above him. Ammonizes emerged in front of the crimson moon. The crimson moonlight merged with the darkness around her with a wave of her hand, further saturating it. The crimson darkness then swept over Solomon, melting everything in its path. The figure of Solomon on his ruined throne froze entirely under the illumination of the crimson darkness, as if time itself had stopped for him. The reality around him was slowly eroding, it looked as though everything had been drawn into a mosaic painting. Akas's looked at this, then raised his balance scale as chaos trembled around him. His figure began to emit an endless stream of pure light. No more chaos, he declared, as his voice reverberated around the world. Ads by PubFuture. The balance scale radiated a terrifying shimmer of light that illuminated it all. The chaos of Solomon was erased from reality wherever the light passed. The light also swept the entire world in that moment, as everything and everyone below gods and kings of angels came to a halt for a brief moment. The very order of reality itself also became visible before dissipating. In the sky of no man's land, the twisted divine kingdom that floated disappeared, leaving only a floating figure. The figure was Solomon, and his body was illusory and ethereal, it looked as if he would disappear at any moment. His anchors had collapsed, as had the last remnants of his empire that supported him. In the end, he was alone, just as that bastard implied. He laughed at the realization, releasing suppressed emotions, as he also felt his sanity crumble. To top it all off, a massive curved blade pierced his back, while Ammonizes and Akas's floated above and before him. Akas's smirked. Then, he thrust his red sword through Solomon's chest, piercing into his heart, and draining his remaining life. Yo-o-u ba satrd. Solomon whimpered painfully between fits of laughter. His mad eyes were fixed on Akas's. But his laughter suddenly froze. Akas's indifferent voice echoed in his mind. Do you think you got away with it, Solomon? How pathetic. I'm already aware of your so-called resurrection plans. Don't worry, I'm not going to stop your resurrection though, because you're still a valuable chess piece in my plans. Do you finally understand, Solomon? As I previously said, you are nothing more than a poor worm that never escaped my grasp. As the words echoed in Solomon's mind, his eyes widened in horror and fear. His mind racing and his thoughts sluggish. In the next second, Solomon's horrified eyes finally dimmed, his face frozen in terror. His body collapsed and crumbled. Then, it fell into the world below. Some landed in no man's land, interfering with the mythical battle below. Some crushed on the Solomon Empire's capital, drowning countless people. Some merged with lucky creatures, transforming them into insane and powerful monsters. The flags of the Solomon Empire began to fall from their poles and onto the dusty ground. Finally, twilight erupted from the sword of Occuses and shone on the collapsed empire, signifying the end of an era. Chapter 60. Adam and Occuses. A few moments ago. Northern continent, no man's land. Occuses and Adam confronted each other in the ruins of the battlefield, stained with flames and blood, as the war of gods continued in the sky. You seem to have been through a lot, Adam. Occuses smiled as he walked towards Adam, holding Grossil Travels. Did your father's death affect you that much? Adam remained silent as he watched the Occuses, who descended through historical projection. Then, a shimmer of light flashed across his hand, morphing into a golden cross. The cross caused Occuses' eyes to narrow. He actually felt a threat from the cross. Despite the fact that he has descended through historical projection and his power is far from his full might, his senses remain the same. As expected of him, Occuses thought calmly, knowing full well that Adam had not revealed everything in the original timeline. Adam was able to shape the majority of the fourth epoch and even the most of the future. He indirectly manipulated Solomon, causing the gods to be suppressed. Whether it was Sosria or Adam, they were both a part of the ancient sun god. So, what he inferred is indeed correct. He is fairly certain that Adam is far more powerful than he appears to be. Like him, the ancient sun god intricately plans for every situation. So, even if Adam pulls out something shocking, he honestly wouldn't be that surprised. He knew that the chances of him losing this battle were too great, unless his true body managed to descend after dealing with Solomon. Also, there is Grossil Travels in his hands. Ads by PubFuture. One might think, this is sequence 1 characteristic of visionary pathway, just by taking it, won't he cut off the path of godhood for Adam? But, Occuses was well aware that things would be far from simple. Adam is the divinity of the ancient sun god, which added far too many variables to the mix. He has no idea how much power Adam really has now or what his whole cards are. Is the Chaos Sea included? He had no idea. He could, however, guess that even if Adam found a way to connect to the Chaos Sea, he would not do so until the fifth epoch, for the same reason that he isn't touching that sea despite also having found a way to connect to it. The reason for this is that the God Almighty will is also strong in this era. He is certain that Almighty will begin awakening in him the moment he established a connection with the sea. And now there's this cross, and even though he can't see through it completely, he can feel a holy aura emanating from it. That's very similar to his back then. Again, there are so many variables that just thinking about them gives him a headache. These will not be a problem if his true body is present, but the situation is completely opposite and unfavorable right now. Nonetheless, he had no intention of backing down. Even if he loses, he will be able to see through Adam. This is also required for his future plan against Adam. Adam gave a gentle smile. Father will come back, Occuses. He looked the Occuses in the eyes. He will rise once more and reclaim the authority that rightfully belongs to him. It's no surprise Aemon refers to you as a zealot. Occuses' brows furrowed as he stood before Adam, staring at him. He then stated, I am also waiting for him. I killed him with my own hands in past. I'll do it again in future. He said it word for word. You betrayed him, Occuses. After hearing his words, Adam corrected him. At his lowest point, when he was completely vulnerable. Yes, I did, Occuses admitted. However, so what? He spread his arms wide open. We live in a crazy world where even I, a literal god, can easily die under certain circumstances. I had to learn this lesson the hard way, Adam. I was filled with arrogance when I was a king of angels. I was lawless and unrestrained. I waged war on gods under his banner and in the name of spreading his glory. But everything I did was just to satisfy my own vanity and hatred. Ads by PubFuture. However, he noticed my problem and took it upon him to teach and correct my ways. He said in low voice. Then, he took me right in front of the barrier and made me see into the cosmos and the horrors that lay within. I felt so small and helpless. This was a huge blow to my past self. Akasis stated. This is what caused everything to change. At that moment, a fire ignited in my heart. A fire called ambition. In the end, that fire burned down the world and civilization itself. Akasis said as he raised his hand. A blinding ray of light fell from the sky, sent by his true body, and struck his hand. Under the blessing, his divine aura and power began to emerge visibly. Adam heard everything and remained silent and calm, but his eyes and the cross in his hands began to glow golden. Akasis smirked and pointed with his finger at his heart. The fire still hasn't been extinguished, Adam. As the golden sun in the sky expanded, he raised his hand and clenched it. The flares of sun descended into the world, morphing into terrifying white swords. Meanwhile, Akasis continued, as he looked at Adam. Quote, Rather, it is burning brighter than ever before. Finally, he waved his hand down as white swords fell from the sky and blazed towards Adam, each with the power to pulverize the entire earth. Then, Akasis looked up at the sky and yelled, Leodoro. Ads by PubFuture. Silver blots of lightning erupted from the void, illuminating the entire northern continent in blue hue and striking down on Adam. Ammonizes. The darkness of the night sky solidified and surged straight down, devouring everything in its path, including reality. It crashed from the sky to the ground like a tsunami, heading straight for Adam. Light, darkness, thunder, everything descended towards Adam, intent on destroying him. Adam's expression stayed unchanged as he observed everything. Then, he held up a golden cross and pointed to the sky. The cross shone brightly as it rose from Adam's hands and expanded into a massive cross that pierced the sky. The cross, which emitted holy light, stood before Adam. Authority of light, Akasis contemplated the cross. No, this is somewhat different, I have no control over it. But, it's indeed light. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Boom, 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 white swords, thunder blots, and raging darkness smote down on the cross. Despite its trembling, the cross remained standing. The attack of gods was concentrated on the cross and had no effect on the world around it. While their attacks melted upon contact with light of cross, the cross began to dim and visible cracks appeared, under their combined bombardment. It appeared as if it could collapse at any moment. Adam's voice suddenly echoed in the surroundings. The historical projection of Lucas. He began to make a prophecy to destroy the historical projection. Why would Adam use the name Lucas instead of Akasis? After all, the historical projection that was summoned was off Lucas Reyes. What does Lucas's historical projection have anything to do with Akasis? However, before he could finish the prophecy, Akasis declared, "Speaking is prohibited here."